How's it going, guys? It's Richard and welcome to this Evolution of Combat analysis video. Now, I wasn't originally going to be doing this video. I was actually doing another video talking about magic damage and the way that weapons, different magical weapons, affect the damage output. But unfortunately there were a lot of numbers involved and I wasn't explaining it particularly well, and I was confusing both myself and any potential listeners. So I've decided to make this video as a prerequisite, and what I'm going to be talking about in this video is weapons, their damage, speed, accuracy, and the way that tiers stay the same, and the way that all the various variables affect abilities. So a couple of basic rules of thumb to start with. Weapons of the same level, so with the example of Rune that I'm going to be using in this video, all have about the same damage output. Now obviously this is changed when you change between using dual wielding / two-handed weapons and then one-handed weapons, because two-handed / dual wielding weapons offer about 50% more damage than you would get with one-handed weapons. So let's open up the equipment interface and do a few examples. So if we show the Rune longsword, you notice that the damage right here says 706. Now what you have to do here is minus off my strength level, which in this situation is 94. So with the damage of the Rune longsword, you get 612 damage. Now the next thing to take into account is the weapon speed. So right here the weapon speed is fast, which means that you have one attack every 5 game ticks or one every 3 seconds. So when you calculate the DPS, so you do 612 divided by the weapon speed of 3, and you get 204 damage per second. Now obviously this gets multiplied up when you're calculating abilities, but this is basically how weapons of varying speeds have the same damage output. So that's the example of the Rune longsword. And now we're going to move on to the Rune 2H sword to show you the difference between the various attack speeds and things, and then the multiplicated damage. So in theory this should offer 50% more DPS. So if we equip it, you notice that the damage is 1236. Now once again, if you minus off my strength level, then you get 1142, as you can see by hovering over the weapon. But in this situation you have a different attack speed. So this time it's average, which is one attack every 6 game ticks or once every 3.6 seconds. So let's do that damage calculation again. So do 1142 divided by the attack speed of 3.6, and your damage is 317, which is pretty much 50% more DPS than you would previously get with the Rune longsword. So following that rule that the two-handed weapon is about 1.5 times as good as the one-handed weapon. Now this also applies when you're using range weapons. So let's wield the one-handed range weapon. Now one thing you'll notice about range weapons is that they don't have, the one-handed crossbows don't have any damage modifier themselves, but the two-handed ones do. So with the one-handed crossbows, the damage is purely calculated by the bolts. So once again you notice that the damage is my range level added on top of the bolt damage, so the actual damage is 480, and the attack speed is fastest, which is 1 every 4 game ticks or once every 2.4 seconds. So once again let's do the calculation, 480 divided by the 2.4, and you notice that the damage is 200, so very similar to that of the Rune longsword, so keeping in theme with that similar damage on the same tier. And then once again let's look at the two-handed equivalent. And notice the damage is considerably higher. The damage is actually pretty much identical to that of the Rune 2H sword, and that is because they have the same attack speed. So once again, it's 1142 divided by the 3.6, sorry, and that gives you the damage output of about 317. So there you go, offering that 50% damage boost. Now a couple of extra things to note. The accuracy, for example, all the accuracies of weapons on the same tier stays identical, so they all have 704 accuracy. So when attacking an enemy that has no weakness, then they're always going to hit about the same amount of times in a sample of however many attacks. Now, the next thing to take into account is how abilities affect the damage output. So basically when you're calculating the damage, when you're using an ability, then the weapon does basically the same amount of damage, that even if they have different attack speeds, if it's the same tier, and that is to normalize all damage, and then it gets added together and you get yourself a rather round figure. Now to do an example of this, the best way to figure out the actual damage that a weapon is outputting is to do the basic ability that you get at level 1, which for the example of melee is slice, and I believe for range it's piercing shot, sorry. And then when you perform a critical hit with this, it will always do 125% of the damage. So what you do, you then take the 25% off and you have your weapon damage output. So I'm going to stop the live recording here, as there's not really much going on, and I will show clips of me doing these critical hits so you can see exactly what the damage output is and the comparison between the two-handed and one-handed weapons. So first up I'm going to be doing the Rune one-handed crossbow, and you notice that the critical hit that I hit was 705. Now obviously this is the 125% damage, so when you take off that 25%, you get yourself 564 damage. Now if we do exactly the same with the Rune Longsword, then in theory it should offer exactly the same critical hit, which as you'll see right now was 704, so it was incredibly close to that of the Rune one-handed crossbow, so you can assume that they are definitely very identical. So now let's look at the two-handed weapons. If we look at the Rune two-handed crossbow, you'll see that it gave a critical hit of 1010, so when you divide that by the 1.25, then that gives you 808 damage, which is pretty much 50% more damage than you got with the one-handed crossbow. So let's move on to our final weapon, the Rune two-handed longsword. I think it's just Rune 2H sword, and that gave us a critical hit of 1017, so slightly higher than the Rune 2H crossbow, probably because my strength level is slightly higher than my range level. But then when you work that out, that gives you pretty much exactly that 50% damage boost over the Rune longsword. So throughout the course of this video, we've shown pretty clearly the way that weapon speed and weapon damage link together to form a very nice normalized ability damage. We've also shown the way that the two-handed weapons and dual-wielded weapons have that slight edge over one-handed weapons, although I might like to mention that when using dual-wielding at the moment, it only takes into account your main-handed weapon when calculating ability damage. Although as of 24th of February 2013, this is still not fixed, but it's something that Jagex have said they're looking into. So we've come to the very end of the video now, so I'd like to thank you very much for watching. If you would like to see more of these videos, then if you'd like to subscribe, then that's always nice, and you can see further Evolution of Combat analysis videos. And also, if you've liked the video, a lot of effort is put into it, then that means a lot if you'd like to click the like button. Finally, if you have any further ideas of things that I could do for Evolution of Combat analysis videos, then feel free to suggest them. I'm always happy to take new suggestions. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.